Gather round the campfire, friends. I have another chilling tale to tell you.
They are hundreds of young men from all across the country by one chilling clue: graffiti of a smiley face found
More
nearby.
than 40 college-age men who mysteriously drowned, the tragedy spanning 25 cities and 11 states. Two former NYPD police officers say that they are all murder victims linked to what they call the Smiley Face killings.
It's the true tale of a killer, or maybe killers, who roam free, leaving a sinister calling card behind. The dreaded Smiley Face. This story begins back in 1997 with a young man named Patrick McNeil. Patrick was a 20-year-old college kid at Fordham University. He was a friendly, outgoing guy who loved sports and dreamed of becoming a teacher. He came from a small town, the all-American boy next door. That February, Patrick went out drinking in Manhattan one night with his buddies, tossing back cold ones like college kids do. But, unlike his friends that night, Patrick never made it back to his dorm room. The next morning, he was just gone, vanished without a trace into the bustling streets of New York City. 2 months later, Patrick's body was found floating face up in the East River between Brooklyn and Queens. The cops called it an accidental drowning after a night of too much partying. Case closed. But one detective couldn't let it go. Kevin Gannon was a veteran NYPD detective, working Patrick's disappearance from the start. On paper, it looked like a simple case of tragic misadventure, but too many things just didn't sit right with Kevin's seasoned cop instincts. And the more he learned about what happened to Patrick McNeil, the more convinced Kevin became that the boy's death was no accident at all. It all started with witnesses outside the bar that night. They said they saw Patrick stumbling outside around midnight, looking dazed and unsteady on his feet, then wandering off down the street with a strange man and woman following close behind him, stalking him from their creepy double-parked car before vanishing into the night. And that was the last time anyone saw Patrick alive. That prickled the hair on the back of Kevin's neck. He knew most drunk college kids don't just randomly wander through the streets of Manhattan alone after midnight. It made no sense. Had someone deliberately lured the boy away into danger? But the deeper Kevin dug into the case, the more questions came up, like why Patrick's body was found floating face up when drowning victims are almost always face down. And then, most suspicious of all, the medical examiner's report itself. Buried in Patrick's autopsy results, Kevin uncovered mention of odd ligature marks and burns around the boy's neck, as if Patrick had been violently strangled by a cord or rope before his corpse was dumped. But the police had simply ruled his death undetermined drowning, and case closed. Right away, alarm bells went off for Kevin. Nothing about this sat right. Patrick's death reeked of foul play. Someone wanted this boy dead, someone who knew how to cover their tracks. But why target a random college kid for murder? And how had the killer so easily duped the cops into overlooking such a sloppy cover-up? The chilling questions ate away at Kevin. He had to find who was responsible, for Patrick's sake, but also for Kevin's own peace of mind. He promised Patrick's parents he wouldn't give up until he uncovered the truth. Little did Kevin know just how deep and dark the truth would turn out to be. Over the next year, 2 more young college men just like Patrick disappeared in Manhattan. Both also last seen drinking at bars before vanishing without a trace, only to be found inexplicably drowned days later. Lawrence Andrews, 21 years old, discovered floating under a pier in the exact same remote Brooklyn spot as Patrick's corpse, ruled yet another accidental drowning. And Joshua Bender, 19, a student who supposedly tumbled into the Hudson River all the way up in northern Manhattan. Quite a feat considering Joshua was a local boy who knew the neighborhood streets and waterfronts like the back of his hand. In both cases, the victims' bodies showed zero signs of trauma or struggle. It was as if they willingly stumbled off the face of the earth, only to reappear days later floating serenely in the river. By now, a whisper of suspicion was definitely prickling at Kevin's brain. 3 athletic young men don't simply topple into rivers along their familiar hometown streets. Not without help, at least. Someone seemed to be deliberately targeting these boys as easy prey. But why? And how were they covering it up so flawlessly? Before Kevin could unravel the knots in this mystery, fate swept him off to a new post supervising the Bronx Homicide Task Force in 1999. As the years flew by, the unsolved riddles of those drowned boys gradually faded into the back of Kevin's mind, but he never completely let it go. So when Kevin retired from the force in 2001, the first thing he did was reopen Patrick McNeil's file and start quietly digging once more. He recruited his former partner to help investigate, chasing every hint of a lead. And gradually, the strands of connections between those 3 drowned victims began to surface from the shadows. Ominous patterns emerged the more cases they examined. Young college men vanishing near bars or parties, only to inexplicably drown days later in nearby waters. Too many similarities to be random coincidences. The cases clustered along the I-94 interstate, running through the Midwest down to the Atlantic coast cities. Kevin and his partner labored for years gathering such strands of connections, until 2006, a chance discovery electrified their investigation, proof they weren't the only ones tracing these sinister patterns. In Minnesota, a criminology professor had uncovered identical clues from a string of drownings in his area. Young college men fitting the same profile, vanishing after late nights out only to end up mysteriously drowned. His own maps traced the same interstate highway running down towards the East Coast and Kevin's New York City cases. Kevin rushed out to Minnesota to meet the professor and excitedly compare evidence. The matching victim profiles, the identical drowning timelines clustered around Interstate 94, the baffling gaps in police investigations, all of it lined up perfectly. After poring over their collective case files, both Kevin and the professor gradually noticed an eerie common thread tying many of the crime scenes together. Sprayed onto walls or bridges near where the bodies were recovered, they kept finding variations of the same ominous symbol, a taunting smiley face, leering out from the shadows as if secretly gloating over the deaths. Sometimes the graffiti marks were faded or halfway obscured, other times boldly prominent, even featuring devil horns and other embellishments. No 2 seemed exactly alike in size or shape or style, yet all projected the same chilling mockery, like the killer was secretly communicating through these codes on the wall. Killers hiding behind the smiley face graffiti adorning murder scenes up and down the East Coast. For now, the smiley-faced killers roam free. The only hope we have is that finally, the weight of undeniable evidence forces authorities to shed their arrogance and open their eyes to the nightmare-stalking innocence under the mocking smile of their graffiti calling card. Until then, no one is safe, and the smiling cabal's reign of terror continues.